Glenn Thompson. I live in Huntsville, Utah. I've been doing this since 1960. I took out an apprenticeship in 1959, and the apprenticeship was for 4 years, and just everything materialized into a job with J.G. Reed & Brothers, old saddle company here in Ogden, and worked for them for 22 years, and then went out on my own. And it just was interesting. I liked working with my hands, and as time went on, it just got more interesting, more of a challenge. To make a saddle like the one I've got here, probably about 60 hours with the floral stamping and everything. And you know, they vary. Just a plain saddle you could do in probably a week, 40-hour week, but with the intense carving and everything, it takes a little bit more. I've made them for Miss Rodeo America, Miss Rodeo Utah, and Miss Rodeo Ogden. Over the years, I've made probably close to 4,500. There's one here in the museum. Oh, this is great. It brings back a lot of history. It's neat that they can put all this together and show people what used to be done. It's been a great thing for me to be involved with all these people that's still interested in horses. I have retired, but still working.
I started through the junior posse, came up through the junior posse, went on to high school rodeo and college, entered the Miss Rodeo Utah, Miss Rodeo Ogden 5 times. Kind of a late bloomer, finally figured it out the 5th time where I won the Utah title. Went back to Miss Rodeo America to Las Vegas, Nevada, and was lucky enough to be crowned Miss Rodeo America that year. It was a very tough year. I remember Ben Day telling me one time that his military year, it took him 20 years to finally find something good out of it. There were a lot of good things out of Miss Rodeo America, but there were a lot of hard things. But every one of those lessons were very well learned. They've helped me throughout my whole life. I have great memories of the people I met, the friendships I've built. You know, so it was a great learning process for my life. And it was a goal. It was a goal ever since I was probably 10 years old. So it was one of those things that milestone in my life I achieved. You know, you can't tell any little girl not to do something. They'll do it anyway. And the more you say don't do it, they'll do it. So if that's their dream, you can't take away the dream. And if they want to do it, support them wholeheartedly. They will grow so much as a person, whether they win or whether they lose. Each competition is such a growing experience. And the friends you make are just phenomenal. I still have friends from my high school rodeo days. I'm still friends with Miss Rodeo Arkansas. We go back to the reunions together. So it's a wonderful experience. So if that's your dream, I say go for it with all of your heart. I am just thrilled to death that they have started this museum, and just honored beyond belief that I'm being inducted into it. It's just, this is one of the highlights of being Miss Rodeo America, Utah and Ogden is, wow, it's still paying off 27 years later. So thank you. Appreciate the nominee and the consideration.
I'm John Bascom, the youngest son of Earl Bascom, who is being inducted this year of 2013 in the Utah Rodeo Hall of Fame. So I'm here today to kind of talk about him a little bit. And Earl was born in 1906 in Vernal, Utah. His father was a deputy sheriff, John W. Bascom. I'm actually named after my grandfather. And John Bascom was a deputy sheriff. He used to chase Butch Cassidy. So my father had a lot of stories about that, but his rodeo career started out in Vernal, Naples area, in Uinta Basin, and they used to ride anything that walked or crawled or jumped, just for entertainment. And that continued until later in life he just became a professional rodeo cowboy. But in 1914, the family moved to Alberta, Canada. And Raymond, Alberta was a Mormon town up there, and they had the first rodeo in 1902. The first rodeo in Canada, professional rodeo, was held. Raymond Knight, originally from Payson, Utah, was the producer, and the town was actually named after him. So the Bascom boys all worked for the Knight Ranch and rodeoed on the night rodeos, stampedes they called them. And so he and his brothers became professional rodeo cowboys. His significance in being honored today is his art. Although he's an inventor, he invented several important and designed and invented several important rodeo equipment pieces. A hornless rodeo saddle, which is still used today. The bareback rigging, the one-hand bareback rigging, which is still used today. The reverse opening side delivery rodeo chute. The rodeo high-cut rodeo shafts. Those are all my father's design and inventions. And so he always wanted to be an artist, so he came to BYU and took art. In fact, he took every art class that they had by the time he graduated in 1940. And then continued with his art and really became the most prolific cowboy artist and sculptor in the history of Utah. And that's one of the reasons he's being honored here today, not only because of his professional rodeo career, where he actually achieved. He was an all-around champion many times, but he really made his international name in the field of fine art, and sculpture and painting. And it's what a great honor for him to be honored here in the Utah Rodeo Hall of Fame. It's I'm just amazed what a wonderful, wonderful facility and museum they've put together, and I can see it just growing. It's just wonderful.
I'm Jerry Rose, and my father was Archie Anderson. He was raised in Harrisville on a farm, so he's been around horses his whole life, loved horses his whole life. When he was a young man, he broke horses for the Army, and then he was drafted. He actually broke his back when he was breaking horses for the Army, and he was drafted into the Army, to the remount in the cavalry. He was married to my mother, and she was pregnant with me, and he was drafted with a brace on his back, and into the Army he went. So he was always dealt with horses. Even when he was in the Army, he trained troops to pack mules that went to Burma, and rodeoed, I think, even on weekends when he was in the Army. So this has been a lifelong ambition of his to rodeo, and he was truly a cowboy, knew everything about a horse. He furnished movies, horses for the movies, for TV shows, for Bonanza and Gunsmoke and all the big westerns at the time. He started out riding broncs, and then went to bulldogging, and then finally roping. And he won the Ogden Rodeo several times roping. And then he became a pickup man. So he traveled all over the country with Cotton Rosser as a pickup man. He went to the national finals as a pickup man when it was in Oklahoma City and when it was also in Los Angeles. And he was pickup man for the Cow Palace in San Francisco for over 30 years probably. He passed away too young. He was only 61, and he died in 1982.
I am Sherry Bascom Scott. I am Texas Rose Bascom's daughter. And she was the world champion trick roper. I was her third child of 5, and Mom was in show business way before I was born. She and my dad was the world champion all-around event rodeo star, and she was the world champion trick roper. And they first started out traveling around in rodeos, and then she ended up being in Western movies and went on tour with Bob Hope, and she was on the Ed Sullivan Show and an Ida Ray Hutton show and all the early television shows. And she had a beautiful trick roping act in fluorescent lights so that they all glowed when they turned the lights out. Texas Rose toured the entire world with Bob Hope, Bing Crosby, Roy Rogers on USO tours, I guess that's what it's called. And our family was very close to Roy Rogers and Del Evans. We toured with them a lot, and their children and us, my family, kids, we all entertained with each other, and we were close friends. Mom and Dad lived in many different places, but I was raised in Linwood, California, and that's where I would say she spent most of her time. However, she retired in St. George, Utah, she and my dad. And actually, then they moved to Parowan, but my dad was born in Vernal, Utah, so they lived in different parts of Utah, and she actually passed away in St. George. This museum, I love it. And it's really quite an honor, and I'm sure she's here in spirit somewhere, because she would have loved this.